And now, without further ado, I'd like to hand the mic over to our speakers. They may begin whenever they are ready.
Thank you very much, Mira. I appreciate that. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We're very excited to have you with us and look forward to providing you with some insights into digital transformation in today's regulated product development world. Some of this content you may already be familiar with, and we do hope that other parts provide new insights for better managing data in the future as part of your overall product development process. We'll start out today's session by discussing why we should be thinking about moving from documents to data and how documents are managed today. Of course, we meet with tons of customers every week across a variety of industries and get to see firsthand what's happening in the real world, including challenges with the current processes and why they exist. And we'll round that out with how we see our customers digitally transforming unstructured data and some strategies for how we can do better. We'll, of course, like Mira said, have time for Q&A at the end, so please continue to submit your questions throughout the session in the chat panel. Oliver, tell me a little bit about what you're seeing at customers that are looking to digitally transform. Why are they really looking at moving from documents to data?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jennifer, for introduction. Yeah, I saw a lot of customers which have a lot of documents with unstructured data. And yeah, it's very difficult to handle the unstructured data, as you can imagine. And data and documents is difficult also to use for other systems. So I saw this in my previous company for a lot of times. And yeah, we had a lot of trouble and a lot of challenges because, of course, as you can imagine, these data beside a document, yeah, it's simple data, but yeah, only in a document.
Absolutely, I've seen that as well. And really, what challenges does that tend to cause?
I would say, in my opinion, when you want to manage complex models within documents, it reaches absolutely its limits. It's completely a mess to manage this in documents because, yeah, our products become even more complex in this time. And building relationships between this different information with different documents is really hard to manage.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. And of course, as businesses grow and change, the regulatory requirements and product complexity is also changing and growing. And while requirements management can help companies capture the expectations along with the product development cycles, trying to keep those requirements inside those disconnected documents or tables is really no longer working. How do product complexity and product families or systems contribute to that complexity overall?
I would say product complexity is increasing due to more electronic and software, even in the classical field of mechanical products. You can imagine, for example, a video endoscope. In former times, it was only glass and metal in an endoscope, and you couldn't find any electronic or even software or even services in this kind of product. And there are a lot of different examples in the market. And what we see today is that even those really mechanical or former mechanical products move to electronic. For example, when you look on a video endoscope, there's a chip on the tip on front, and you have electronic in it, and you have a lot of software stuff for diagnosis, of course, for example, of cancer and other diseases. And yeah, this makes it much more complex because this different departments, which are responsible for this, they have to work together. And also external requirements have set the bar to a much higher level. New norms and standards, as well as enhanced regulatory requirements, are forcing the companies to manage them.
Can you give me some examples of these higher levels of external requirements and changes in the regulatory environment?
Yeah, for example, as all of you probably know, of course, we have new requirements in EU, for example, the NDR, but also from the US market and from other markets like Japan, coming from the JPAL. We see a lot of new requirements. And for example, this could be requirements regarding the cleaning at the end of the manufacturing process to ensure that the device is really clean and nothing is still on the device. Of course, this is not pretty new, but yeah, they have a more focus on this, and you have to ensure that you can satisfy these requirements. In addition, of course, we see an increased importance, for example, of post-market surveillance, where you have to have a good surveillance of your market, what is going on with your product, even after you pushed your product to the market. And I think there are several more examples where we can see that the requirements are not the same as compared to 20 years ago.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. So as companies move their requirements management process to a more structured data management approach, how does that change that landscape?
I would say, of course, at the end, you have to fulfill the requirements, but moving into a data structure provides several possibilities to build relationship between these increasing and dependent requirements, because they are not standing alone. You have a lot of dependencies in these requirements bunch, and the reuse of basic requirements could also be improved. For example, when you have in a medical electronic device, you have a lot of requirements which are, I would say equal or nearly the same for a lot of products, or even when you work based on product families, you will have several requirements which stay the same. So therefore, it could be quite efficient to reuse these requirements. And beside that, change management will be more easy due to more granular structures. You do not have to use the whole document again and change it. The whole document with all of these requirements, you can change granular requirements, and it makes it much flexible. For example, when you cover a lot of your products with one requirement management file, for example.
That's really cool. And all of that sounds to me like your requirements and standardization is just going to become a lot easier as you go through a digital transformation process. Is that true?
Of course, in my opinion, it is true. It will be more easy to manage it. And I believe that requirements management with a simple Excel sheet will only be manageable with high efforts in the future. So you will need a lot of stuff to control it. And for me, this data structure could be one part of a more efficient way to manage these requirements.
Excellent. So we've talked a bit about, linking requirements and moving things into a more data-like structure and ease of use and whatnot. How does all of that relate to risk management?
I think when we talk about risk management and requirement management, of course, it has to work together. Risk management is, from a data point of view, handled very similar, in my opinion, to requirements management. As an overlaying process during the whole development phase, and even later when the product is still in the market, risk management is one key element of ensuring medical device safety. This is not new to you, of course, and transferring these tables to a structured data approach can help to increase the visibility to say, okay, we have this risk and we have the related requirement which can mitigate this risk, and we want to see it in the system. It should be visible, and to increase this visibility, these data structures could be helpful. And it also improves the collaboration between the different departments who are involved. And for the risk manager, it's quite essential to see what is going on.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was just about to ask you about the collaboration aspect. So, okay, when it's handled in tables, like it often is today, that's obviously a pretty manual process. How do different departments, work together?
Oh, this is a funny question. To be honest, and I have to admit that I also did it in my former times like this. What they are doing is they try to work on one Excel sheet, and we all know this. We copy it several times. We make an underline dash comments X, Y, Z from person ABC, and then the poor guy of risk manager has to put it all together at the end and have to ensure that everything is covered and everything is okay. Beside that, the risk manager has to take care manually if the mitigation tasks have really been performed. And sorry to say, this is not a really nice job when you have only an Excel sheet or something like something similar.
No doubt, no doubt. That really does make risk management incredibly error prone and super difficult to collaborate on. I've definitely seen some amazing spreadsheets over the years, but that doesn't change the fact that even when the data is managed by a system, companies are exporting it to Excel to actually manipulate and revise that data on a regular basis and create charts and whatnot. Not to mention how everything links back to those dependent documents. How does that really start to transform when you move to a more data-based approach?
I would say you can see for the first time when you have to raise a change which items are affected. This is pretty good when you manage it completely in the system. Also, the developer can see the risk which is related to his part and he's working on. So the direct link from a risk assessment to a part, for example, ensures that nothing is could be forgotten. And yeah, I would say, as I said before, in former companies, it took a lot of time for the risk manager to help bring everything together. And I saw risk managers which needed approximately 1 day to collect and double check if all mitigation tasks have been really accomplished. So
wow.
yeah, this is a really
That's
big approach, I would say. And of course, also a cultural change, but I think it can help a lot. And I would say in the future, it's nearly impossible to manage complex systems without having the systems or this data in a structured way in the system.
absolutely. I agree with you. I mean, just thinking about the fact that it takes a day just to collect and check the data, let alone actually how long it's taking to perform the work. I mean, what kind of reduction in time can companies expect to see with a more data-based approach?
I would say it's absolutely depending on the company and the data given. But in my experience, they can reduce multiple maintenance of data and not to forget the quality of the data. If you have a single source of truth of your data and you can relate this data to other effects and you have changes, you can really see the impact, what is going on, and you have full control over your product. So, of course, talking about reduction of time, it can help you, of course, to save time. But what is even more essential for me is to improve the quality of your product and the quality of data, and you can rely on the data you have. So this is quite essential for me.
Absolutely. And really in this, document versus data, manual versus automated, the whole linked process, it does always come back to the product and making sure that you're putting out a quality product. And putting together specifications in big, lengthy documents, manually collecting the associated information, distributing it out to other parties to use or consume, oftentimes in multiple different systems, both internally and externally to the company that owns the data is just crazy. I mean, I understand that it's important and necessary to do all of this work alongside innovating new life-improving and really life-saving devices in a lot of cases. It seems like every day those looking to innovate and change the landscape of medical devices are met with new challenges to achieve their goals in a time frame and at a cost that meets market demand.
Of course, and yeah, it could be annoying to manage all these data, but they are quite essential. When we think back, I would say nearly 10 years, of course, we handled most of our data in documents, and this is also for the different consumers of the data, it was okay. But now I would say in medical device companies, yeah, what is really still really common in food industry and is that you have to provide your data also to different databases. And as you probably all know, you have to provide a lot of these data to these different databases like for NHS or GUDID for FDA or what is now coming up and not completely clear, but it will come is the European database on medical device. So I think this will be quite a challenge. And you all know you do not have to do it once, you have to repeat it because at any point of time when you change anything on your metadata, you have to provide it to these databases that they can consume it. The positive effect is also that the transfer can be automated via an interface without having anyone in the middle. So you do not need persons who collect all these data from different documents and put it in an Excel sheet or anything similar and provide it to these databases. So yeah, this can help saving a lot of money. And even when you look internally in your systems and you want to provide these data, for example, for ERP system, I'm talking about technical data like a weight of a product, it could be very helpful to provide them these data via data management system. And yeah, that it can be used, for example, to calculate the storage and so on and so on. So last but not least, of course, what is also quite essential, and we talked about this before, is quality of data. You can make automated checks. And yeah, this is only possible when you have it in a structured way and not in a document. Last but not least, and this is also one example where data can be used in a better way, is automated testing. What I see at a lot of customers today is they have a document-centric approach of storing these test results. I see a lot of time really big tables of data, raw data managed, and when you think of raw data which you cannot put in a table, for example, like a video, Ultra HD or 4K video, it's quite hard to store it in a document because then, of course, you lose a lot of information. So this can be also really good managed in such a system, where you also store the data, the raw data, and the test results on this at the same place, so everything is connected together. And of course, you have the possibility to use this data to reflect that results and use it, for example, to compare it with a given model, like a CAD, a MCAD model. And yeah, quality checks, automatic quality checks are possible, and long-term statistics are also possible. So you can see how your product behaves in case of quality issues. And last but not least, of course, this is the basic foundation for automatic testing, which can save you a lot of money. So yeah, Jennifer, a lot of things I think we can do when we move documents to structured data. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of opportunity.
That's pretty good. So I think what we see now is the fields of application and how we see it managed in a day. And yeah, I would like to introduce Thomas now, who will tell us a little bit more about fields of application.
Thanks, Oliver. And Jennifer, that was interesting. So yeah, I'll be talking a little bit about some of the places where we actually see this being done, being where our customers are actually moving from documents and into data. And the example I'm going to start with is where everybody knows requirements, right? Everybody has requirements. So what we typically see is that requirements are usually captured in documents. Could be Word documents, could be Excel sheets, but very often it's in a file. And of course, then you have, when you're working with it, when you, for instance, just to get the requirements released, you have to release the entire document. You cannot release one requirement because the requirement is part of a document. So you have to release the entire document. Also, if you want to change a requirement, you have to change the document. You have to change everything. And searching for it is also quite difficult, because if you, let's say you have something changing, like Oliver mentioned, if something changes, you have to do change management and you have to assess what the impact is. So going and doing change management to something and then finding the requirement that is actually impacted by this change is very difficult if that document, if that requirement is buried inside of a document. So what we very often see from our customers, if you can take the next slide, Oliver. is that requirements is very often the place to start with moving from managing files to managing content, so using data. So this is an example of requirements management inside of inside of ARAS, where you can see instead of having a document as we know it in Word, we have what we call a requirements document, where we build a data model where we have a requirements object that we link together, and then we enrich each of these requirements objects with data. So we see on the left-hand side that we have a structure, right? We have the 3D printed design requirements, overview, chapter 1, chapter 1.1, chapter 2, and so on. So we have sections, subsections, and everything you usually have inside of a document. So the structure is the same, but it's broken into an actual data model. If we look at the right-hand side, where we have the actual requirement and the content, this is also data objects, right? So everything in here is data and can be reused. And the good thing about doing this inside of a PLM system like ARAS is that you see we have a drawing here. The CAD is, of course, a part of the PLM system. So instead of having an image that we just paste into a Word document, we can now link it to the actual CAD data. So the CAD model can be referenced inside our requirements, and then we know if we change this CAD model, then we also need to change to assess this requirement. And if we change this requirement, we know which CAD model might be affected. And we can do that with any of the objects that we have inside of the database. This gives us a much better traceability, and it also makes it possible for us to actually release one requirement at a time. So you don't have to release only or the entire requirement structure. You can release the single requirements and then move on working, meaning that you can now do your development in parallel streams. You don't have to wait until everything is done. You can move parallel with the different tasks you have to do. That is a way to actually reduce the time it takes to get your product ready. And we see a lot of customers having big benefits about that. If you can move to the next slide, then we can also break this down to an even more granular level, right? Because we see here in the background a Word document where you have requirements which states max power consumption of 500 watts. That's of course important, but if it's inside of a Word document, it is basically for information only, and it's, to be honest, quite useless. If we take that and transfer this in as data, then of course we have to have the same information. So here we see we have a requirements document, we have the structure as we had on the previous slide, and then in this 3.1.2 power consumption, we can see that the peak power consumption should not exceed a maximum of 500 watts. But what is this 500 watts when you put it into a system like ARAS? Is it still just text, or can we use it for something more? And if we take the next slide, we can see that when we translate this into data, we can actually use this 500 watts and turn it into a parameter. So we can say that we have a parameter that has a value of 500 in a unit of watts, and it's related to this requirement 192 in the revision A. So now this is not only a piece of text, it's actually a parameter that we can use, and a piece of data that we can use across all the different elements of the PLM system that we have. That means we can use it in testing, we can use it in work instructions, we can use it in manuals, we can use it in everything that we want. And we can also actually now go in and do active change management down on the parameter level of our requirements, because as we see, the parameter of 500 watts is actually version control. That means it's under change management. Can we have the next slide, please? So I'm going to move now to another example of transforming into using data instead of documents, and that is about we're talking about manufacturing and test. So for instance, building work instructions or process plans, those two go hand in hand. So if we go in and look here, this is again ARAS, and it's a solution called manufacturing process planning. What we can do there is that we can take a product and we can go in and say, okay, this is how I would like to build this process. This is my build process. So we go in and we create again a structure of data where we say this is what we want to do in operation 10, 20, 30, 40, and so on. These are the things that I want to do. And as we build this structure, automatically on the right-hand side, where we have the text, where you can see operation 10 assemble fan, and then you have a picture of the extruder from a 3D printer, that side is automatically being generated for me while I build this structure in the right-hand side. And as I consume parts, if we look at the workbench in the bottom half on the left-hand side, that's where I can consume parts of my bill of material, and that will also automatically then appear as consumed parts in my work instruction. And again, this picture that we see is not just a copied in picture, it can actually be related to the actual 3D model that we have, because inside of the system, as we said, you have the CAD drawings, and automatically inside of ARAS, we can then generate 3D viewables and 3D models that we can then go and take snapshots of and embed into this work instruction. So again, we can now link everything back together, and we can use data so that when we now do change management, we can go to see which process plan is being affected, which step in the process plan, are there any drawings we need to update to or make an update to the process plan so that we get the new drawings in. We can also see it back to the requirements. So there are a lot of benefits that this gives. And if we can go to the next one. And then going in and saying, so we have this this example of these 500 watts, and they can also be used, that parameter can also be used inside of the process plan, because now this parameter of 500 watts is a piece of data that we reuse across all the different elements that we have. So we're in this case in operation 30, where we have an electrical test, we can now use this parameter that we defined earlier and embed that into this process plan. It will automatically come then in your work instruction. And the good thing is now that if we change that parameter, we only have to change it one place, right? Because it's the same piece of data that is being reused everywhere. And if we change this parameter through the enterprise change management that is in the PLM system, we will automatically know everywhere that this will affect all the pieces of structures or data that will be affected by changes, this simple parameter of 500 watts. And then when we generate our test plans from that we have to go through to test our product here, then we will test this power consumption. We will test it and measure it against this parameter of these 500 watts. So again, just be taking something as simple as turning 500 into a piece of data instead of a simple text string gives us a lot of benefit, both when it comes to change management, when it comes to to flow of data and process throughout the entire system. So there is a really strong benefit of taking things out of the files, not thinking about files, and managing the content as data instead. Can we take the next slide? And then to take a completely different example, where we also see a very early stage for people to move from documents to data is, of course, the FMEAs. Right? FMEAs usually look the same for everyone. They are usually made in Excel. I think I've seen, of course, a few customers that are using tools for it, but very often we see it done in Excel. But again, everything that you have in Excel can be modeled in a system. And this is an example of the standard FMEA solution inside of ARAS, where you go in and this is an example of a design FMEA where the actual FMEA is generated based upon your product structure. So you get a lot of this automatically for free with the breakdown on how should you actually do this. And then you go in and instead of writing text in columns and rows in Excel, you actually now create pieces of data. So your item, your functions, your preventions, detections, everything here can be data. And more importantly, when you go in and when you make recommendations, you can recommend what should be done. In order to reduce an RPM number, you need to do something. Usually it means you have to change something. Maybe you need to change some documentation. Maybe it's the work instruction that needs to be changed. Maybe it's an SOP. Maybe it's the drawing. Maybe you need to do a BOM change, but a change to something. So you need to run a change order process. You can note that in this recommendations part of the FMEA inside of the PLM system and link it to the actual type of process that you want to run, for instance, an engineering change order. And then when you come to, if we had more room on the screen, you would see the implementation part of the FMEA, where the actual ECO process that will implement this, that change that we have defined is directly linked and embedded into this FMEA, so you can constantly see the status and the progress of this process that is running behind actually updating the data. And once that is done, you can go in and right-click and update your FMEA and calculate the new RPM number. And again, this is then something that, because we have it as data, we can link all of these, create relationships between all of these data elements and have them work together. And since we have the data in the actual data in the same system as the process is being executed, we now have a system that actually both governs the data and executes the process. And can we take the next slide? So we've done quite a few webinars over the last few months, and there is one question that very often is asked to us, and that is, how do we get started with something like this? And one of the things that is important to start with is actually build a business case. If you want to change something, if you want to go from documents to data, if you want to implement PLM, if you want to implement anything, no matter what you want to do, you need to build a business case. And the way we do this together with our customers is that we go in and we look at, so what is the benefits that you can achieve by doing something like this? So if you go for a PLM system, what benefit can that give to the company? And this is an example of saying, okay, benefits can be on revenue, cost profit, capital, and risk. And then we say for revenue, it could be reduced time to market, reduced time to volume, better customer service. Cost profit, scrap rework, material cost, risk, we can go in and affect have better risk assessments and less audit failures. So this is a way of going in and pinpointing, okay, so where can a PLM system actually benefit the business? And if we take the next slide, we need to go a little bit deeper, right? So let's say that you decide that what's strategically important for your company is revenue growth and increased profit. Then you have to go in and say, okay, where can what I want to do impact the strategic goal of the company? So if we want to increase the profit, where can a PLM system, for instance, help there? And then there could be many things, but I've just taken 2 examples here. One could be efficiency, right? Because without a system like this, finding and updating information takes a lot of time. You have to be Sherlock Holmes very often in order to find the correct data, and that can take a lot of time. And very often we see that it's actually the most experienced engineers that are doing the searching. PLM can also reduce the number of meetings you have because you have data. You don't need to have that much meetings because you have data available and you have the processes in there also. You can also see that the process lead time is being improved because now there is visibility. And another thing is firefighting and cost of errors. Because you now have what's popularly called the single version of the truth or one version of the truth, everybody is working in the same system on the same data. There is not like Oliver mentioned, and people working in requirements 4711_ODI comments, and then and then I am working on _TSK comments, and then it's collected, right? You have collaboration, you have visibility, and the fact that you do active change management and configuration management means that you will have less firefighting. The cost of error will go down because you will find things earlier and react quicker. And then if we take the next slide, then this is an example from an actual customer who went through all of this. And then the way we recommend actually going in and describing this is going in and saying, okay, we have some issues. What is the impact that this issue have on the business today? And what is a possible solution for this? And then going in and saying, okay, if we solve this, what gain will that actually give the company? And what will the bottom line impact be? And this, of course, have to be an assessment. Sometimes it can be calculated quite detailed. Sometimes it's more of an assessment. But getting it as concrete as possible is quite good. Next. And then I think it's time to hand it over to Christoph, who can take you through a little bit more of the technical side of what you can do.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Yeah, I just want to add some of my knowledge in implementing PLM systems and take a little bit some kind of the insights into the technical implementation and the technical things that needs to be done through that journey from documents management to data management. And yeah, the first thing that you can see that we already mentioned that sometimes during the webinar that you need to transfer the information from the document into smaller pieces into a database. And when you're putting that in the database of a PLM system, then you have some kind of default capabilities of a PLM system that can be used together with that pieces of data. And first of all, we can talk about that lifecycle thing that we have in PLM systems. So that lifecycle can be managed through a change process or release process, so that this requirement, for example, can have a lifecycle state for in work, in review, released or obsolete. And of course, related to the lifecycle state, you can put some permissions on that. So maybe that in work data is only accessible by editors from that data, and when it comes to release, that data will be visible for the full company. And then we can talk as well for history files. So when you're going through the lifecycle and releasing new revisions of some kind of data in the database, then you will have that traceability inside the history, that you can see that you have some revisions of that test B case or test B data, that there's some kind of history behind that test B Ref 3, that you can access what's the difference to Ref 2 and Ref 1. So on that is automatically traced and automatically stored in the database with the default capabilities of a PLM system. And another example that I want to talk about this is that effectivity thing. When you're talking about some kind of configuration management, that you maybe have the risk in the version 4.1, this is only valid for some kind of serial numbers. When talking about your products from 0 to 50, and when it comes to the serial number in production 50, then the new risk is occurring, and you need to manage this by that effectivity. And that effectivity can not only be a serial number, it can also be a date or something like that. That depends on the company, how is that managed, and so on. Now, Oliver, can we move to the next slide, please? Yeah, and all of that brings some kind of benefits that you're having with the PLM system. You can see that you have the possibility or capability to link same kind of data to each other. And when you're thinking about this, the first obvious thing that you have is a bill of material, some kind of a link between parts that is building then a bill of material. But when you're talking about requirements with pieces of data and not documents, you can also build some kind of a bill of requirements that brings some possibilities for you, that you can manage all the pieces data individually to the other ones. And for sure that you can put some business logic between that links between requirement 1 and the child requirements that you're having for this. And that business logic can be, of course, company individual, and that can be differ from company to each other. And when you can link same types of data to each other, then that is definitely possible to link data to other data. Maybe that requirement that have a link to a test method or to an assembly or to a part or to other things in the PLM system. That depends on your data model, on your business, and on your object that needs to be managed. And then you're having that data in the data model related to each other, then we can go on a little bit further on. I speak in my slide before regarding that history thing. And that history can be also put on this full structure of the data. And then we are talking about what is called in the PLM world as baseline. When you're looking at the phase A could be some kind of the definite or phase of your product dev process. And at the end of phase A, the assembly has the ref A and the requirement has the revision A and test method. And as you can see that in the picture, and then you're moving on with your product dev process. And at the end of the phase B, this data has changed. For example, the assembly has a new revision with the B, and the requirements has also a new revision with B that has a child revision 2 with B and requirement 3 with revision A. And the test method has not changed to phase A because of the version B can use the same test method than the version A for requirement 1. But you have the possibility in a PLM instance to look back in the history, and that you have some kind of comparing capabilities between the baseline after the phase B and phase A, so that you can see how is your dev process or what is happening with your data during the dev process. And that is nearly impossible when you're doing that with documents, when that pieces of information is stuck in documents and you cannot have access to that and you cannot build that linking thing. That is then nearly impossible. So that's almost done, almost everything that I want to add to that. Maybe we have one slide left. Yeah, that's the end of the presentation, I would say. We can move over to the Q&A session.
Thank you very much for that insightful presentation. Now, I would like to invite our audience to continue sending their questions or comments right now using the questions window for the Q&A portion of this webinar. I've already received some of those questions, so I'll start with those. Our first question here is, how does the software capture change control?
Sorry, I was muted. I can try to answer that, and any of you others feel free to jump in. So, how the software captured change control? Well, basically, inside of the software, there are several change management processes and functions built in. So everything inside of ARAS can be under change control, be version managed. And the way it works is that you want to change something, you start a new change process, for instance, an ECO, and you add something as an affected item. That could be a part, it could be a CAD document, it could be a document, it could be a requirement, and it can be all of the above at the same time. What the system does is that it will automatically look across all the data that you have chosen to want to change. It looks across the other data in the system and tells you if what you are planning to change is being used anywhere. So what are relationships that piece of data have to other pieces of data in the system. So that gives you the impact analysis of, if I change this, that might affect all of these other things. And then you can make a conscious decision to, do you want to change that also? And then you basically just tell the system what you want to do. Do you want to up-rev something? Do you want to create a minor revision, a major revision? And then as you go through the process of change control with the next step is that the new versions will actually be created for you in the database, where you can then go in and it's allowed to check out data and edit data. So now the process actually controls whether or not you are allowed to change the data. Then you can go through review phases. You can have 1 review phase, 2 review phases. You can select a 4i principle or not. That can also depend on the process. It can depend on the data that you select are changing, and so on. And when this process is released, then what Christoph explained happens, where the system will automatically create all these baselines for you, and also version all the relationships between all of this data, so that you will get proper baselining and a proper history trail of everything that has happened. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much for that answer. If no one has any more comments, I'll move on to the second question here. So the second question here is, how are requirements linked together? Can you use a language like SysML to define requirements and then contain them within PLM?
Anybody? No? Me again? Yes, you can use SysML, and you can get the SysML inside of the PLM system and get your requirement structures built based upon SysML.
Thank you. Our next question here is, we are looking into Polarion. What is the benefit of looking into this instead?
Perhaps I can answer this. Of course, Polarion is a pretty good tool to handle requirements. But when you want to have the full picture, in my opinion, you need also the deliverables and, for example, the drawing, the parts, the documents. And yeah, the challenge is when you use a standalone system that it's hard to link these deliverables to the requirements themselves, and to see if all the requirements have been fulfilled. In my opinion, it is necessary to bring it together in an easy way. And I would say ARAS is a really good system to bring these two things together, to have it on one page to see if it fits and if these requirements have been fulfilled.
Thank you. Our next question is, what preparation must customers perform to accomplish transition from paper to electronic data? Is there a general implementation plan, and can you speak to it on a higher level?
Yeah, maybe I can answer to that. First of all, of course, we have some implementation experience and plans ready for that we use in our customer cases to help the customer for their journey from documents to data. But in my experience, the projects are, or the highest requirement or the highest hurdle that we have to take in that projects are not from the technical point of view, or have not a technical impact. That is solvable. We all are engineers, so engineers can solve that problems. But we need to have, but the working methods as the customer side will be changed during the journey. When you're thinking about documents or that document-centric thinking in companies, and then it comes to the data, that is a different way of working. And that transfer in the working culture that needs to be managed, that needs to be supported by project marketing, taking the key users into the project, into the implementation project, that helps that this hurdle is taken. And maybe this is the most important thing, that we are supporting the customer with the organizational change too, besides the technical thing that we need to have. So I would answer the question that have an open mind on their journey. This is the best preparation that we can get from the customer.
Thank you. Our next question is, we are exchanging information via documents with our supply chain. What is the best strategy to integrate my partners, suppliers, and subcontractors into that framework?
Maybe I can answer the question too. There are different strategies for doing that. We have some tools available that allows data exchange and offline access to data that coming from the OEM system or from the PLM system, so that external partners can work offline on that data and send then packages back that can be imported easily, so that this supplier or partner can be exchanged data somewhat easily with the PLM system via their tools. But on the other hand, this is also a possibility to have that external partners have access to the PLM system with a very special permission set, that they can only see that data that is interested for them, or that they have to work on, so that both possibilities or different possibilities are already there to integrate partners. But there's no doubt about that in case of medical device product dev, such partners needs to be integrated on their journey. And medical device manufacturer cannot do this by his own. It needs to be aligned with the supplier and subcontractor and all the external partners.
Thank you. Our next question here is, I saw a press release from ARAS regarding a partnership between ARAS and Minerva. Can you explain what that is?
Yes, I can take that. So basically, it's something that we're very happy about in Minerva. For the last 8 years, Minerva have had an industry solution for the medical device industry. We also have one for the electronic and high-tech industry. And now we are in March launching the biggest overall and the biggest improvements to this solution, these solutions that we've ever had over these last 8 years. And we are also now entering into a strategic partnership with ARAS, where we will actually provide this under our own name. So it will be called Minerva PLM, and it will be a complete PLM offering from Minerva. And it will be based on the ARAS platform, but it will be a Minerva product. So that's something that we are very, very excited about.
Thank you very much for those answers. We've now reached the end of the question and answer portion for this webinar. If we weren't able to attend to your questions, the team at Minerva Group may try to follow up with you after the webinar, or if you have any further questions, please direct them to the email addresses that are now showing on your screen. Thank you to everyone for joining us for today's webinar. You will be receiving a follow-up email from Xtalks with access to the recorded archive for this event. A survey window will be popping up on your screen, and your participation is appreciated as it will help us improve our webinars. I want to give a big thank you to our speakers, Jennifer, Thomas, Christoph, and Oliver, and we hope that you found this webinar informative. Have a great day, everyone.